Okay, so good evening, everyone. I'm Carol Henley from Exit Realty PEI, and this evening we have a special guest with us, Angela MacDonald of Angela MacDonald Consulting. Given the uncertainty of what's going on these days with the COVID-19 with businesses, we know that businesses really don't know where to go from here, where to plan, how to plan, what's going to happen in the future. So I reached out to Angela to give a presentation to us this evening and give us some advice and give us an indication of what she actually does with her business to help other businesses plan for the future. So I'm just going to pass it over to Angela. Angela has a PowerPoint presentation that she's going to talk us through this evening. And at the end of the presentation, she'll give you her contact information. So if you have any further questions concerning what she's going to talk about, then you can just reach her, or you can reach out to me and I can give you her contact information. So Angela, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time. And I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to tell us this evening.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me. So I realize obviously this is a very hard time for businesses and individuals. And I really worry about small to medium-sized business, whether they just don't know what to do with all the uncertainty right now, or they just don't feel comfortable doing it on their own. I know, because I am one, that business owners are losing a lot of sleep right now about this. And the biggest thing in my mind right now is to just cover risk the best that you can and to try to ease some of the worry and the stress that's going on within people. So we're going to dive into that today and kind of look at what people can start to consider to navigate through the time and lessen the stress as much as they possibly can. So I just wanted to kind of give a little information about me, since you might be saying, who is this girl and why should she talk to me about this? So I'm an accountant by trade. I have an MBA and I have my CPA. Obviously, Angela MacDonald Consulting, I do contract CFO work. So I come into businesses who don't necessarily have the capacity, they don't have enough work for a full-time CFO, or they only need one for now for a month or a week or a year, and then maybe they'll have a full-time position, or maybe the need just isn't there anymore. Previous to that, I worked in corporate finance for a few companies, most recently 5 years with a biotech startup. And I loved what I did, but I grew up wanting to work for myself. I grew up in an entrepreneurial family, and that does something to you as a person growing up in that. So I was constantly thinking, like, what can I do? How can I have my own business? What should I be doing? So entrepreneurship obviously has its ups and downs, and a downturn in the economy certainly is one of them for many people. So I'm just going to jump into it and we'll take it from there. Before I talk about the strategy of what people should be doing or might want to do right now, I really want to address the elephant in the room. Typically, when I go into a business, people are very embarrassed. People who are super organized and have it all under control don't usually call me because they don't need me. But when I go in, there's usually a lack of tools, there's a lack of control, finances are something that they're not super comfortable with, they don't have enough time to do it, which leads to a bit of a mess really quickly because it can get out of control really quickly. Because of this, I went searching to try to find statistics. And what I found was a study that was done for 2018 of over 300 small to medium-sized businesses, and 61% of them had no budget whatsoever for the year. Those of you that do budget are going, oh my goodness, I can't believe that. And then there's the 61% of you right now that are saying, thank God, it's not only me. Because business owners, they're busy people, and typically the finance side of things is the only side of the business that your clients don't see. So that's kind of the part that can get left behind. And it's really not a reason to be embarrassed. There's lots of people that are also doing it. And not that probably won't make you feel any better. But anything we talk about today, you can move forward, whether you've done it before or not. And you don't need fancy accounting software. You don't need to be a computer wizard. It can be done on a piece of paper if you want to. Obviously, I'm going to tell you you should do it in Excel because it's going to be way easier for you. But if you don't have the computer skills for that and you want to write it on a piece of paper, you're going to get to the same place. It just might take you a little bit longer. So first, we're going to talk about in the current climate right now with the coronavirus and everything going on, cash is more important than ever. So what is the purpose of your budget? Typically, no matter what the economy looks like, you're making sure that there's enough cash to continue with your business. You're planning for emergencies that might happen, and you're typically planning for growth. So growing a business costs a lot of money. And usually you spend the money before you make it. So that's a lot of the time what people are doing. 2 months ago, I would have been pushing people to plan, to budget, to understand their growth and how it was affecting them and what their growth strategy should be. Right now, when I'm talking to people, it's a lot different. So right now, we're trying to talk about what your bare minimum costs are. And so that you know every month, what are you spending if your doors are opened or not. And I'm sure a lot of the business people in listening to this are thinking, you know, people use fancy words. They talk about your burn rate. They talk about your runway. The only thing any of that means is how much money you're spending. So all of the fancy buzzwords really come down to when are you going to run out of money? And do you know that? So as a business, you should know if I don't make any money in 65 days, I'm going to have none left. So that's really what it comes down to. So right now, even if your doors are completely closed, every single business is spending money. You have phone bills, you're paying for your internet, you're paying for rent, whether it's deferred or not, you're going to eventually have to pay for it. There's something within your business that is costing you money, whether you're there or not. So when we look at budgeting, I'm talking about obviously not just your budget for this year. I'm talking about forecasting looking forward. I'm talking about looking backwards. So don't try to recreate the wheel. Every business, it sounds really obvious, but you have perfectly good information right in front of you that you can use to make this. So whether you have your past year's financial information, maybe there's some people that say, I wasn't in business last year. Well, you were probably in business for at least a month. So look at last month, what happened? How much were your bills? How much money did you make? Look at percentages of bills, things like that, to see kind of what you should be dealing with going forward. There's some sort of data. And even when I deal with businesses who are looking to start, so sometimes I'm helping people with financials in business plans. What you would say is you still have information. You've had a phone bill before. How much was it? You pay electricity somewhere. How much is that? So there's lots of information you have, so you don't need to completely guess. You can be educated in that sense. And it's really a time to take a step back and look at what's working in your business and what isn't. You need to figure out what your priorities are going to be going forward. And the question is, what does the future look like potentially, and how do you navigate that path? So if you had an original budget for 2020, I'm sure most people are just throwing it out the window at this point, because either you're one of the businesses that are run off your feet right now, or you're not doing a lot of business. There's not a whole lot in between. There are people that might still be on track for their original budgets, but I would say that's not the majority. So you still need to take that original budget, obviously, and use it as a starting point, and that's going to save you a lot of time. So don't just start from scratch and throw that away. Kind of look at that and say what is still useful and what isn't, and then look at the economy right now. And with that, you have to make an awful lot of assumptions, and that's kind of where people are getting stuck. So I understand that there's a lot of uncertainty right now, and a lot of that is it relates to fear within people. And that's what causes stress. So it's sometimes easier not to look at this stuff as opposed to trying to walk through that stress. But I'm really an advocate of kind of breaking through it and trying to figure out what you can to ease your mind a little bit. Before I really get into the nuts and bolts of what I would recommend doing, I just want to mention, without going into detail, that to make sure you are taking advantage of some of the programs put in place for business. I've talked to some business owners personally, and I said, there's some really good programs out there. And some of them said, well, I have enough within my business. I don't really need them. I can make it a few months without tapping into those. And I'm really recommending to take advantage of them anyway, because you never know how long this is going to last. And you don't know that maybe the program will end and you will then need access to the money. So there's certain things, there's an awful lot of it that are loans. So still good that you're able to go get that money. But if it's a loan, remember it's a loan and you're going to have to pay it back. So look at how that affects your business going forward. Maybe you start paying back the loan in 6 months and you were already a business who was really only breaking even. So how does that impact you going forward? But the one that obviously everybody is talking about is the wage subsidy. Important to note that there still are 2 wage subsidy programs. There's the 10% wage subsidy that small businesses can take advantage of, and there's also the 75% wage subsidy. The 75, you need to have lost a certain amount of revenue. The 10%, you don't. You can take part in them both, but it's a max of 75. So you're only going to get 75, not 85%. Also, though, there's the Canadian Emergency Business Account, and that's for anyone who doesn't know the terms, is the $40,000 at 0% interest. And it has a $10,000 forgivable amount after you pay it back by a certain date. There's nowhere else you're going to get a 25% return on a loan like that anywhere. So that's a pretty good one to take, even if it's just in case of emergencies and you're just holding on to it. There's also the Business Adaptation Advice Program, and that's only if you're from PEI. But that is $2,500 at 100%. So typically when you're dealing with Innovation PEI or someone like that, they're giving you 50% of an invoice paid. In this case, it's 100%. And that would be if you wanted help with some of the financial planning, with the marketing, with the HR or the strategy. If you need help figuring out where to go next, that would be what you would use that $2,500 for. So really taking advantage of those programs and making sure they're in your budget to allow yourself moving forward. So this is kind of where it's going to get into the suggestions of what I think and what I'm telling my clients to do going forward. So we're going to talk about something called a scenario analysis. Any financial analysis that you're going to do that is a forecast or that is looking forward, it's obviously not perfect. You're still guessing. Sometimes when you do financial planning, you have a pretty good idea of what is going to happen, and sometimes, like right now, you don't. There's a lot of people that they'll walk you through planning and they'll tell you it's a for sure thing, and I'm never going to tell anyone that. There's nothing right now. Nobody has ever gone through anything like this, so you're not going to get it right. The idea, though, is that you're giving the business options. So what a scenario analysis is, and I use on this slide the example of a Charlottetown restaurant. The reason that I picked a Charlottetown restaurant is because everybody understands how a restaurant functions. So what you're doing is you're basically looking at 3 options of what could happen going forward and what the economy looks like. So usually you're looking at a worst case scenario, a best case scenario, and something in between. And really, sometimes your worst case scenario and your best case scenario are for sure things. Like, this is the worst thing that could happen. This is the best thing that could happen. In today's economy, you don't. So really for this restaurant option, I said restaurants are required to be closed for takeout until fall of 2020 as kind of the low point. And then in the middle, maybe restaurants open in June, but they're required to be takeout only on and off for the next 18 months. So here's where they talk about, waves of quarantine, where things open up, they shut down again. How is that going to impact my business? And then maybe restaurants open when they open PEI gradually in May. Restaurants are one of the things that are allowed to open. The business is slower than normal due to people not wanting to go out as much, but they're opened and thriving just as they would maybe in a slow season. So of those three options, you would really think hard about what those look like in your business. And then you would plan out complete budgets based on those three things. So a lot of people find it a very frustrating effort to do a budget at all. And I'm sitting here telling you to do three of them. I understand that. The thing about doing that, though, is that there's different implications to all three. You're considering different staffing options. So your costs associated with all three of these options are going to be completely different. So if I just said, I'm going to plan for option 2 in the middle, and then depending on what happens, we'll go from there. You're still going to have to rework the whole thing eventually, because you're going to have to figure, when am I going to bring my staff back? Well, it's not so easy as saying, when am I going to bring my staff back? When can I afford to bring my staff back? Should I even do takeout, or should I just stay completely closed? Those are all conversations you have to have with yourself when you figure out what these options are. So maybe takeout doesn't make sense for you because, I don't know, maybe certain staff are required and they would be paid way more than you would even make doing takeout. So you might as well just stay closed until the restaurant can open properly. If you just do option 2, you won't know that. Maybe you'll open and you'll say, okay, well, takeout's the option, we'll do that instead. And you'll be losing money. And typically when there's not a written down plan on paper, you don't realize you're losing money until it's too late. So they say that business owners typically don't know that something is affecting their business until it's affecting their pocketbook. And that is typically true. There is a sense of it that a lot of entrepreneurs are pretty intuitive people. But it does usually hurt the most when it hurts your pocketbook. So what you do here is you do a complete budget for option 1, a complete budget for option 2, and then a complete budget for option 3, taking into consideration your cash flow and your customers and everything that goes along with budgeting something. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to calculate risk and plan for a future problem in advance. So maybe when you consider some of these options, they aren't really options at all. And the third is really about timing then. When does it open? When is there a volume of sales appropriate that I could open? So if you look at this scenario analysis, I said, option 3, restaurants are open and usual in May of 2020. They're slower than normal. That's probably, even at best case, that's probably not exactly what's going to happen, right? So we go through the 3 options for your business. None of them are going to be, even there's 3 options, none of them will be exactly correct. But one of them will probably flow along close enough that that plan will be relevant. So the idea is to get an option that is close enough to what is reality so that you can at least use that plan. Okay, that's pretty close. I'm going to hire X amount of people now. I'm going to hire the rest of them in December. And the idea behind of it is really peace of mind. So you can focus on your business, on what's going on keeping your customers engaged, on talking to them on social media and doing whatever you're doing, and you're not worrying all day long. It's really about the mental health of business owners at this point, and not something I usually talk about when I talk about budgeting and I give budgeting seminars, or when I do budgeting training for entrepreneurs. But at this point, really, it's getting to the point for a lot of people where it's the worry is crippling. So how do you take away some of that worry? You plan for it. So that's really what we're doing here. And after you've done that, what we're doing is we're looking at key considerations of that. So obviously your fixed costs. So how much do you need to survive? And when I say that, a lot of business owners don't like to talk about paying themselves. Right now in your business, you need to consider how much you're paying yourself. So when I'm telling people to do this exercise for their business, I'm usually telling them to do it for themselves as well, so that you know how much do I need to pull out of this business and how much does that leave the business with so that it can continue to survive. It's a really stressful time for business owners as well. So what's the bare minimum you're paying even if you're not open? Insurance, rent, phone, internet. We talked about that. There's certain things that even if you don't open at all. Also, who are the low-hanging fruit that you can talk to? Who is it that you know is always going to be with you, your loyal customers? And can you talk to them and say, listen, what are your guys' plans when this opens back up? If you're a restaurant and you have customers that come in every week, can you reach out to those customers and say, what do you guys think? Like, if we opened up, would you guys still come every week? Because they're going to give you the honest feedback, and use that information to kind of plan for the future as well. Obviously, you need to talk to your bank if you haven't already. I hope everybody has already spoke to their bank and found out what their options are regarding their business. And then obviously you're planning in your budget. Don't just remove your rent for the next 3 months. Figure out how much you're going to have to pay back. Plan for those deferred payments. If you're doing things like selling gift cards right now and you're using that money to stay afloat, figure out that your margins are going to be smaller in the next couple of months because you're going to have to pay for whatever that gift card cost is, whether it's a product cost or a time for a service. And then you really utilize the grants that are available to you, is the biggest thing. There's no shame right now in taking advantage of government supports. The government wants you to survive and you want to survive in your business. So really reaching out and utilizing those supports the best of your ability. So that's all I had to talk about today. I hope it was useful. Carol, if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
I don't have any questions, but I did really like your point, especially as a business owner myself. It's the unknown. It's, when is this going to end? How long is this going to go on? How is this going to affect my business? And it can be crippling sometimes and very worrisome. So I like the idea of sitting down and, forecasting. And because we don't know what's going to happen, I liked your idea of the 3 scenarios and like, okay, well, if this happens, this is what I'm going to do. And I know I heard you speak about this in one of the Facebook groups that we're in, that some of the people that you work with forecast, over, well, if this happens for the next year, how am I going to plan for that? And I think that sitting down and doing that, even though I'm one of those business owners that I hate the money part of my business, I know I need to do that part, but it's not enjoyable to me at all. So I'm probably one of those people that I deal with it, but I definitely avoid the whole budgeting part. But I think in a time like this, in order to feel like I have some control over the situation and to, help me sleep better at night, I think that actually sitting down and doing this forecasting would be a huge stress reliever for myself, knowing that, even if this does go on for a really long time, that's okay because I have a plan to do that. So I really like that idea. And I also, the $2,500 grant that's available, I think that everyone should take advantage of that. And if you, everyone should apply for it and try to get some sort of assistance in whatever manner you may need it. Because I think it's a really valuable offer. So, so yeah, I don't have any questions. It was very concise and, to the point. So I appreciate that, because I do know that sometimes, especially financial people, do tend to speak a different language. So I appreciate that you didn't do that, and it was very clear and understandable. And I think that people will appreciate that as well.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So your information is up there, Angela,
Yep.
and people can reach out to you, and if they want to use your services, then I think that this is definitely the time to do so. So
yeah. No, I'd be more than happy to help anybody who wants to reach out. I'm pretty available. I work from home regardless of what's happening, so not much has changed in my world.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you guys for joining us. We really appreciate that. And again, you can reach out to Angela for any questions or comments. And you can also reach out to me as well. And yeah, we'll see you again the next time we put on something like this. So have a great evening.